Members, as you know, we have reached out to Representative Ilhan Omar on multiple occasions, inviting her to testify and inviting and requesting documents that appeared in the trial exhibit of the U.S. versus Amy Bach. Her office or her staff was named in multiple trial exhibits, and we have endeavored in multiple ways to get access to that because, as everyone knows, Representative Omar had some role, whether inadvertent or not. She passed the Meals Act in March of 2020, and that took the guardrails off the federal school nutrition program, which created the conditions for Feeding Our Future. And so we invited her to testify about the law she passed. We invited her to testify and talk about the documents that are listed in the court case, and she has never responded to our multiple inquiries. So then we sent a letter after the hearing 2 weeks ago saying that we would like her to respond with those court exhibits by today, May 5th. Once again, she has not responded in any way to our inquiries. And so the only tool left for us as a committee, if we want to get these documents, is to issue a subpoena. We have never done this, members, in the history of this committee. We have never done this in the history of this body except for ethics investigations, and I don't do it lightly. But Representative Omar is a public servant. She had a direct involvement in creating the conditions for Feeding Our Future, and as a representative of Minnesota, I believe it's important for the taxpayers to understand the role she played and understand the role her office played in communicating with the defendants in this case. So, under our rules, the committee is permitted by a 2/3 vote to request the issuance of a subpoena in the conduct of any investigation or activity or series of investigations or activities within the jurisdiction of the committee. Our nonpartisan staff has drafted the subpoena, which was in your packets. And with that, we would like to have a vote on subpoenaing Representative Omar for the documents in question as outlined in our letter dated April 22nd and is outlined in the subpoena which is before you. Is there any discussion on the order of business to issue a subpoena? Yes, Lead Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess maybe just a process question. I gather this is maybe a motion that you're making. It seems like I can see some nodding from some of the GOP members, but I just don't know procedurally what's, just first want to verify that.
Yes, so it's a motion for the committee to issue a subpoena to Representative Ilhan Omar regarding the items in the subpoena which are in your packet.
And then,
so it's referenced here.
And then, Madam Chair, I'll have just a few questions for you, I guess, as the maker of the motion. It looks like this matches a letter from April 22nd, as you referenced. Was that the first request that was made for this information from Congresswoman Omar from April 22nd, 2026? Yes,
it was the first request. We had planned to request if she appeared before the committee, but she did not, so we made the request for the trial exhibits immediately following that hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the trial exhibits, have you tried to get those trial exhibits from the court or from those involved in the case? That might be the more, since you're looking for trial exhibits, that seems like a pretty direct way to go.
Absolutely. We certainly did try. So I looked into it, and I was not able to find them. So with the help of our exemplary House librarian here at the Capitol, she looked into it. She was not able to get it online through the PACER system, so she went to the federal court to get the documents. And as she discovered, and we all now know, these court exhibits, the list of exhibits is public, but the exhibits themselves are under a protective order from the court, and that order binds the two parties. So it binds the U.S. Attorney's Office, the government, and it binds the defendant, Amy Bach, but it does not bind us as a legislature, and it does not bind Representative Omar from disclosing it. These were emails in her official capacity that we should be able to get access to regardless of the protective order by the court. We are not bound by it. She is not bound by it. So it's perfectly appropriate for us to seek them from her office.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess as I'm looking at the list of what you're requesting, it seems like it's coming from the trial exhibits. Maybe the last one referenced the trial exhibits, but a number of them reference other things as well. Looks like just item number 8, it looks like in the documents to be produced, it's, I guess, and we'd be confident that she would have those trial exhibits when in fact there's a protective order saying that nobody but the two parties can get them. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that they were original documents to her office, and I'm sure they're sitting on the server in her congressional office, and we should be able to get access to them.
Okay, and Madam Chair, I guess another question for you here is, well, maybe just one thing that I'll note for all of us is that the exhibit list lists the government counsel, lists the 4 assistant U.S. attorneys who work on Feeding Our Future. I know that 3 of those U.S. attorneys have now resigned, by all accounts because of pressure to take unethical acts by the Trump administration. That's what all the reporting has been. So there's just the 1 U.S. attorney left among those 4. It may be, I don't know if you've had a chance to connect with that U.S. attorney's office directly. I know earlier in the committee you had some trouble connecting with them, but have you had any luck working with the U.S. attorney's office regarding this?
So they are bound by the order, so I have not reached out to them on this, but in other areas of sharing whistleblower information, I have been working with the U.S. Attorney's Office, as I did when it was under acting U.S. Attorney Mr. Thompson, and when he was first a U.S. Attorney, and now under U.S. Attorney Daniel Rosen and his team.
And then, Madam Chair, can you say again how you would use this information? I noticed the first request for this information came just a couple weeks ago. The committee's obviously been meeting since February of 2025. Sort of in what way, and this is our last meeting, I think perhaps, Madam Chair, it's not like you're going to have one more meeting to potentially adopt a report. So how would this information be used, and what caused it to sort of show up at this time just within the last couple of weeks, given that this is back from 2020?
Thank you, Lead Pinto. Yes, so as we've been meeting over the course of these many months, one of the things we've been doing is looking at the business model of fraud, and one thing we're looking for is how did this possibly happen in our state? And as we've been looking at the development of the fraud and looking for the red flags, one of the things that came to my attention earlier this year in 2026 was the existence of the Meals Act and how that led to the conditions for fraud in Feeding Our Future because it took the guardrails off. And so as I started looking into that with our staff, we came across the trial exhibits, and we thought, well, it would be very helpful to understand from Representative Omar's perspective how she thought the Meals Act impacted the community, why she brought it, what communication she had with the fraudsters, because clearly in the video we played a couple weeks ago, she was very proud of the Meals Act. She showed the video, she cut the video at the Safari restaurant, which they were one of the leading convicted fraudsters in this. She had, according to the trial exhibits, multiple communications between her office and the fraudsters who have been convicted. So I think it's important for the public to know what role she and her office played, not only in passing the Meals Act, but in then communicating the information about how the guardrails are no longer in this program to the people who were later convicted of fraud. I think it's very material to our understanding how we got here. And so I will look forward to getting these documents from her. And we hope you also want to get them from her, because it will really help the public understand how this happened And the fact that she had multiple communications with the convicted fraudsters who had also donated to her campaign and many other campaigns, she did return it once they were convicted. But I think understanding her relationship with the people who've been convicted in Feeding Our Future is essential to the public.
And Madam Chair, just one final piece on this. I feel like we've had a lot of conversation, especially on the House floor, about, in fact, from many of my Republican colleagues accusing my DFL colleagues of being too focused on actions of the federal government. It's interesting to me that with the state agencies that we're overseeing, that there's such a focus on this federal piece of legislation. I noted that a number of Republicans in Congress voted for the Meals Act. Whoever authored it in the first place, the fact is that it was something that passed Congress with Republican support. But it's just interesting to me that we would look into that that if the one place where we're going to break all the precedents ever happened in the state legislature to go after this particular piece. Can you talk about that? I'm just trying to get my head around that.
Yes, I didn't want to. I mean, we've been asking for this since our staff is reminding me we initially put out a request in February of 2026. And so we have been trying to get this through just requests, which is the normal course of business here in the legislature. But we have been ghosted. We have been absolutely ignored by a sitting member of Congress, and it is, as you see, the public is so angry. The public is demanding answers, and this is part of our process in getting those answers. So I very much look forward to having you join us in this effort. This can be bipartisan. We've done some good bipartisan work throughout the last 2 years. I hope we're going to finish strong on bipartisan work on the OIG bill and some other things that we still need to get across the finish line. And I would welcome your support for this effort.
Well, Madam Chair, as you led into this, you said, as you all know, we've been asking for this. Today is the first time that I'm seeing this April 22nd letter. I don't doubt that there were some requests was made in February. I didn't, heading into this, I didn't know a request had been made on April 22nd. So even if it was February, we're talking a couple months. April 22nd, we're talking a couple weeks. I will have comments about that relate to the committee as a whole that influence my thought about the value of this information to this committee's ability to investigate anything, much less the Meals Act. I guess I'll just note, as somebody in my work outside the legislature, I work quite a bit with with all kinds of subpoenas, in particular administrative subpoenas that are really investigative subpoenas. I don't feel that we've met the standard that would apply for that here. I will note you yourself, Madam Chair, talked about the precedent of this not being something that has ever happened in the history of the legislature. It is notable to me, as I say, that just stepping back and looking at this case, we had these U.S. attorneys who've left because of actions of the Trump administration. We know that the president and the federal administration have got no hesitation in going after political enemies and in investigating them in all sorts of ways. If there's any sort of wrongdoing by Congresswoman Omar, and in fact, if there's no wrongdoing by Congresswoman Omar, I have no doubt that the Trump administration will do all that it can with the resources that it has, even with the many U.S. attorneys who are no longer working for the Trump administration, including Joe Thompson leading the fraud efforts, who we've been praising quite a bit, and he left in January because of the pressure from the Trump administration to act unethically, and because of the actions that came from, in fact, videos are referenced earlier here. So, Madam Chair, I do not see any value that comes out of this. I don't see, looking at broadly this committee, that this committee would make any decent use of information it would receive. And if there's something to be found here, or even if there's not, I have no doubt that there is plenty of federal investigative energy that would go into it. So respectfully, I would not agree to the issuance, to having for the very first time in the history of the Minnesota legislature that a subpoena would be issued under these circumstances. That's not something that I would support. But I appreciate you bringing it up, and it certainly was worthy of discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Lead Pinto. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate you bringing this forward for us. And it's important for Minnesotans, whether today or whether for the history of the state as we look forward. You know, this specific request in this subpoena specifically addresses a number of things related to Feeding Our Future. And if there's anything that we've done over the last few months that I'm hoping my DFL colleagues have seen and heard, it's that the business model of fraud in Minnesota runs deep. It's industrial scale. And that is exactly what Joe Thompson said. And to that end, Chair Pinto, and to my colleagues across the aisle, this is about the people who have been involved and are defendants in Feeding Our Future, who also gave donations to Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. And then beyond that, if you just read further in the subpoena, it talks about wanting to get the documents contained in the communications with Congresswoman Omar's former staff member, Guhad Hashi Said, who pled guilty to an offense related to the Feeding Our Future fraud scheme, and we are seeking all documents that contain communications with anyone associated with advanced youth athletic development. That's the information as presented right here in this subpoena request. But see, this is only one part of the story. When we're talking about industrial scale fraud, when we're talking about Feeding Our Future, Feeding Our Future is one part of the picture as it relates to what we know is to come in the fraud we've seen in Medicaid. So now we have this opportunity to use our tools here in the House of Representatives to issue this subpoena to gain a greater understanding so that we can stop the web, the industrial scale web of fraud in Minnesota. But it doesn't end there, Representative Pinto, because Congresswoman Omar's sister has been an executive with a business that it appears as though has received state and federal funding that was secured by the Congresswoman herself. In addition, in that very information, with regards to the People's Center Clinic, it has been lauded and celebrated by Amy Klobuchar, including being at the opening of that 2022 ribbon cutting. So there are tons of conflicts of interest involved here. There's an investigation to be had. And this is a subpoena for the information. So do we want to be more well-informed? Do we want the information public for the media, for the investigators, for the accountability, for the people? Or do we want to refuse to use the tools that we have in our toolbox? Not from a partisan lens, but from a perspective of trying to stop the fraud and to protect taxpayers. Full stop. That's what I see as our opportunity here. And you know this better than anyone, Representative Pinto. If there's nothing to be found here, then there's no problem issuing this subpoena. So let's bring light to the darkness.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment? Okay, I appreciate your comments, Lead Pinto, and I appreciate everyone's work on the committee. I do think the subpoena is important. This is one of dozens, if not hundreds of veins we are investigating. We have had hundreds of whistleblower reports. They continue to come in weekly. Even though the committee will no longer have official hearings, we will continue to investigate these whistleblower reports and webs of fraud. We are working very hard, as Lead Pinto suggested, on our majority report, which we will be meeting briefly next week to adopt, and then the minority will have an opportunity to also prepare a minority report. These things are important, members, for the public record to understand the staggering amount of fraud that Minnesota has experienced over the last 10 or more years, and that we are the canary in the coal mine. What we are finding out here in Minnesota has ripple effects for other states that are now digging into their own Medicaid problems and seeing these same red flags, these same webs of interconnected relationships and businesses and family members and fraudulent shell companies. That is what we have found. Representative Greenman, I think, was the first to talk about what's the business model of fraud. And we have seen that in spades in every vector of these crimes, whether it's the different Medicaid programs or child care or potentially SNAP, if we ever get to the bottom of that. And here's the anatomy of a crime, my friends. You enroll as a provider, you set up a location that could be real or fake, you sign up recipients that could be real or fake, and you start billing Medicaid. That's what's been going on. And then you set up a shell company or a related business, or your friend does, and then you're paying for catering services, and you're paying for janitorial services, and you're paying for other teachers, and it just expands the web. Then you use a real estate agent to buy another property. And we have demonstrated these webs, and they will be in our majority report. Then some people were paying kickbacks. Some people were trying to get people to switch to other businesses. Some people set up a protection scheme where they required people to pay $1,200 a month, as was testified last week, to be in a minority child care association. And if people didn't pay up, they were going to get targeted as being a fraudster, even when it wasn't true. This is the pattern. And this is what we're trying to get to the bottom of. And so these documents are important, and I hope our colleagues on the other side of the aisle will vote with us for transparency and accountability rather than continuing to protect the fraudsters.
Madam Chair,
Madam Chair.
request a roll call. And of course, I reject the last phrase about protecting the fraudsters. But in any case, I would just request a roll call. Thank you.
Roll call will be granted. Representative Nash, and we do have to move to a vote. I promised Lead Pinto he would be out of here for a meeting, so we have to vote soon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to point out that under Minnesota Statute 3.153 requires 2/3 of a committee in order to do this, so we would require a roll call, and was going to request that myself.
Yes, and 2/3 for the member of the public is we need 6 votes to issue this subpoena. So with that, the clerk will take the roll.
Chair Robbins,
Aye.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Aye.
Lead Pinto,
No.
Representative Altendorf,
Aye.
Representative Elkins,
No.
Representative Greenman,
No.
Representative Nash, Representative Schultz,
Aye.
The vote is 5 in favor, 3 against. The motion fails and the subpoena will not be issued. But I will continue to try to reach out to Representative Omar's office, and I hope she will eventually respond to us.